At the Christmas party, wealthy women coveted the millionaire widower, but he only had eyes for a pregnant single mother. Their lives changed forever in unexpected ways. A story of overcoming, redemption, and love. Subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and comment where you are watching from. The main ballroom of the Plaza Hotel sparkled under crystal chandeliers that reflected the golden lights of the Christmas decorations. Wreaths of green leaves intertwined with red ribbons adorned the marble columns, while the intoxicating aroma of cinnamon and cloves lingered in the air conditioning, mingling with the expensive perfume of the guests. It was Christmas Eve 2023, and the New York elite had gathered for the traditional charity gala that marked the end of the social year. Sarah Johnson discreetly adjusted the white uniform of the catering team as she observed the event's activity through the service door. At 7 months pregnant, her prominent belly made her walk with measured and careful steps, but her posture remained upright and proud. At 32, she had learned to carry dignity as a shield, especially in environments where her presence was tolerated only as a service provider. "Sarah, are you sure you can carry those trays?" asked Carla, the catering coordinator, with a worried expression. "I can ask someone to take over for you." "I'm fine, Carla. I need this extra money for Emily's Christmas," Sarah replied, referring to her 5-year-old daughter, who was at home under the care of a neighbor. Her voice carried a gentle yet unwavering determination. "Besides, it's just a few hours." Across the ballroom, amidst conversations about investments in startups and travel plans to Europe, David Miller maintained a polite smile while pretending to pay attention to the words of Victoria Adams, heiress to one of the largest pharmacy chains in New York. At 42, he had become one of the city's most sought-after businessmen after becoming a widower 2 years ago, building an empire in the medical technology sector that equipped hospitals across the United States. "David, you simply must see my new yacht. How about we spend New Year's Eve in the Hamptons?" suggested Victoria, lightly touching his arm with fingers adorned with diamond rings. Her red Valentino dress perfectly highlighted her figure, sculpted by personal trainers and plastic surgeons. "I appreciate the invitation, Victoria, but I already have commitments for the end of the year," he replied diplomatically, his dark eyes involuntarily drifting to the service team's activity. There was something different happening that night, an unease he couldn't explain. Sarah entered the main ballroom, carrying a tray of smoked salmon hors d'oeuvres, her movements graceful despite the weight of her pregnancy. She had worked all afternoon preparing those small culinary masterpieces in an improvised kitchen at the hotel, a freelance job that supplemented her salary as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital in New Jersey. Her brown hair was neatly tied in a bun, revealing the delicate shape of her face, and the green eyes that carried a mix of determination and vulnerability. Even in her simple uniform, there was a natural elegance in her gestures that did not go unnoticed by some male gazes in the room. "Be careful not to spill anything, dear," murmured Patricia Smith, the wife of a congressman, as Sarah passed by her group. "Pregnant women can be so clumsy." Sarah pretended not to have heard the comment, maintaining her professional smile as she offered the hors d'oeuvres to the guests. She had learned over the years of working extra jobs at high society events that the best defense against others' arrogance was polite indifference. David watched everything from a distance, feeling a strange connection to the woman moving through the ballroom with a dignity that sharply contrasted with the frivolity of the conversations around her. There was something familiar in her eyes, the same determination he had seen in the mirror during the early years after Helena's death, when he had to rebuild his life from scratch. "You seem very distracted today, David," commented Eduardo Carvalho, his partner at Health Tech Innovations. "The ladies are practically lining up to talk to you, and you can't take your eyes off the service team." "I was just observing the event's organization," David lied, taking a sip of his Scotch whiskey. "It's impressive how everything runs so smoothly." The truth was, that he couldn't explain the magnetic attraction he felt towards that pregnant woman. It wasn't just physical beauty, although she was genuinely beautiful in a natural way that contrasted with the artificiality around her. It was something deeper, an authenticity that had become rare in his world of appearances and conveniences. Sarah felt the weight of the tray starting to bother her arms, but she resisted the temptation to take a break. Every hour worked represented money for Emily's Christmas gifts and for the diapers of the baby that would soon arrive. She had meticulously calculated her expenses, cutting everything she deemed unnecessary to provide her daughter with a special Christmas, even if modest. "Excuse me," said a deep, polite male voice behind her. Sarah turned and found herself face to face with David Miller, whose dark eyes watched her with an intensity that made her blush involuntarily. "Yes, sir," she replied, keeping a professional tone despite her racing heart. "Could you bring me a glass of water, please? No ice," he requested, even though there were waiters circulating with trays of drinks just a few meters away. "Of course," Sarah smiled genuinely for the first time that night. There was something different about this man. He treated her with respect, looking directly into her eyes instead of averting his gaze awkwardly like other guests did when addressing the service team. As she stepped away to fetch the water, David felt a strange sense of loss, as if something important was leaving his life before it had even arrived. He watched her. Marina moved carefully, noting how she placed a protective hand over her belly whenever she needed to lean or navigate around an obstacle. "Interesting choice," Jessica Taylor, another contender of the night, commented ironically, following his gaze. David turned to her with an expression that made Jessica take a step back. "Watch your words, Jessica. This employee probably works more in a day than you do in an entire month." Deal. The atmosphere in the group grew tense, and David took the opportunity to step away, walking toward the area near the bar where Sarah had gone to fetch water. He didn't fully understand what was happening to him, but he knew he couldn't just let that woman leave his life without at least discovering her name. Sarah was returning with the glass of water when she felt a sudden dizziness. The day had been long. She had woken up at 5 in the morning to take Emily to school, worked her normal shift at the hospital, picked up her daughter, prepared dinner, and had spent the last 4 hours preparing and serving smoked salmon hors d'oeuvres. She had skipped lunch to save money, and now her body was paying the price for that neglect. She tried to lean against the wall, but the dizziness intensified. The glass of water slipped from her hands, shattering on the marble floor with a sound that echoed through the hall, drawing the attention of everyone present. David was the first to react, rushing toward her as Sarah felt her legs weaken. He held her firmly by the arms, preventing her from falling. "Hey, take it easy, I'm here," he murmured, his voice laden with genuine concern. "What are you feeling? Dizziness? Nausea?" Sarah tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come out. Her face had lost all color, and she was completely leaning on the strong arm that supported her. "Get out of the way," David ordered authoritatively, clearing a path through the curious onlookers who had gathered around. "She needs fresh air and a place to lie down." With determined movements, he carried her in his arms toward the exit of the hall, completely ignoring the murmurs and disapproving looks that followed them. David carefully carried Sarah through the luxurious corridors of the Plaza Hotel, his firm footsteps echoing on the polished marble. She remained semi-conscious, resting her head against his chest as he searched for a private place where he could help her properly. The soft scent of her almond lotion mixed with the masculine aroma of his aftershave, creating an unexpected intimacy between two complete strangers. "This way, mister." "Miller," said the hotel manager, who had discreetly appeared upon noticing the situation, "we have a private room on the 2nd floor that you can use." "Thank you, Carlos, and please call a doctor immediately," David replied, ascending the stairs with Sarah still in his arms. Despite being pregnant, she weighed far too little for a woman in her condition, which worried him even more. The room was elegantly decorated in shades of blue and gold, with a stunning view of the beach. David gently laid her down on the king-size bed, adjusting the pillows to make her comfortable. His fingers lightly touched her forehead, checking for a fever. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. Sarah slowly opened her eyes, still disoriented. The reality of the situation gradually hit her. She was lying in a luxurious room at the Plaza Hotel, being cared for by one of the wealthiest men in New York City. I'm sorry for the trouble," she murmured, trying to sit up. "I need to get back to work. Carla will be furious if I—" "Don't move," David interrupted firmly but kindly. "You almost fainted down there. When was the last time you ate something?" Sarah looked away, embarrassed. The simple question had touched on a deep wound, the constant struggle to balance her basic needs with financial responsibilities. "This morning, I had coffee," she admitted reluctantly. "Just coffee? It's almost 10 o'clock at night, Sarah." She was surprised to hear him say her name. "How do you know my name?" "It's on your badge." He smiled for the first time, revealing perfect teeth. "But I would like to know much more about you." Before Sarah could respond, there was a knock at the door. Carlos, the manager, entered, accompanied by a middle-aged man with grey hair and an elegant demeanor. "Dr. August Ferreira, our on-call physician," Carlos introduced. David stepped back to give space to the doctor, but remained in the room, watching intently every move. Dr. Ferreira examined Sarah professionally, checking her blood pressure and pulse. "Hypoglycemia," he diagnosed after a few minutes. "Very common in pregnant women who go long periods without eating. The baby is fine, but you need to eat something immediately and rest." "Doctor, I really need to get back to work," Sarah tried to argue. "Absolutely not," David interjected. "Your work for today is done. Carlos, could you arrange something light for her to eat? Perhaps some soup and chamomile tea?" "Of course, Mr. Miller. I will arrange it immediately." After the doctor and the manager left, an awkward silence settled in the room. Sarah discreetly observed David, trying to understand why a man of his position was dedicating so much time and attention to a stranger. "Why are you doing this?" she finally asked, her voice almost a whisper. David sat in the chair next to the bed, his eyes meeting hers. "Because I recognize strength when I see it, and you, Sarah, are one of the strongest people I have ever met. You don't even know me. I may not know your whole story, but I saw how you worked down there. 7 months pregnant, visibly tired, but maintaining a professional smile and treating every guest with courtesy. That says a lot about your character." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. It had been so long since anyone had truly seen her, beyond the responsibilities and struggles she carried. "I'm not strong," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I'm trying to raise my daughter alone, expecting another baby from a man." Rodrigo felt something twist in his chest. The vulnerability in her voice awakened a protective instinct he hadn't felt in years. "How old is your daughter?" he asked softly. "Emily is 5 years old. She's the most precious thing in my life." Marina's face lit up as she spoke about her daughter. "She doesn't completely understand why her dad isn't here or why we're having a new baby. But she's so loving, so understanding." "And the father of the baby you're expecting?" Marina's expression hardened. "Raphael, we dated for 2 years. I thought I had finally found someone who truly loved me, who wanted to build a family with me. When I told him about the pregnancy, he said he wasn't ready to be a father and that I should handle the situation." "Handle?" "He suggested that I shouldn't have the baby." Marina placed her hands protectively over her belly. "When I refused, he just disappeared. Changed his phone number, changed jobs, as if we had never existed." Rodrigo felt an intense anger towards a man he didn't even know. How could someone abandon a woman like Marina? "I'm so sorry," he said sincerely. "You didn't deserve that." "Maybe I did," Marina sighed. "My mother always said I was too much of a dreamer, that I believed too much in people. Maybe she was right." "Your mother is wrong." Rodrigo leaned forward, his voice heavy with conviction. Believing in people isn't weakness, it's courage. And raising 2 children alone while working as a nurse and still taking on extra jobs, that's pure heroism. There was a knock at the door, interrupting the moment. Carlos entered with a tray containing steaming vegetable soup, whole grain toast and chamomile tea that exuded a comforting aroma. "Thank you, Carlos," Rodrigo said. "And please inform the catering team that Marina won't be returning to work today. Arrange for full payment." "No, wait," Marina protested. "I can't accept this. I need to work to earn." "You've worked, and nearly fainted because of it. The payment is rightfully yours." Marina ate slowly, savoring each spoonful of the soup. How long had it been since she allowed herself a truly nutritious meal? Rodrigo watched in silence, noticing how she relished each bite as if it were a luxury. "Tell me about your work at the hospital," he asked as she ate. "I work at St. Mary's Hospital in New Jersey, pediatric department." Marina smiled with genuine pride. "I care for children with serious illnesses. It's emotionally challenging, but also very rewarding. Seeing a child recover, starting to smile again. There's no price for that." Rodrigo was surprised. St. Mary's Hospital was one of the main recipients of the equipment from his company. There was a chance that the devices he developed were saving lives in her hands. "What an interesting coincidence," he murmured. "What do you mean?" "My company, Health Tech Innovations, provides medical equipment to St. Mary's. It's possible you've already used some of our devices." Marina nearly choked on her tea. "You own Health Tech. My God. Your equipment is amazing. The new heart monitor that arrived last month has already saved at least 3 children that I know of." The expression of pure enthusiasm on her face touched Rodrigo deeply. This was what had been missing in his life for the past few years, finding someone who truly understood the purpose behind his work. "You really love what you do," he observed. "I do. Even when it's hard, even when I lose patience, I know I'm making a difference. Every child I help care for is someone's daughter. They're the whole world to a family." Rodrigo thought of Helena, how she also had that passion for caring for others. But Marina was different. There was a practical strength in her that his wife, born with a silver spoon, had never needed to develop. "And what are your plans for when the baby's born?" he asked. "I'll only take the mandatory maternity leave. I can't afford to be away from work for too long. My neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, will help take care of the kids. She's an angel." The simplicity with which Marina planned her life, without luxuries or indulgences, but with unwavering determination, impressed Rodrigo. In his world, people complained about problems that Marina wouldn't even consider true obstacles. "Marina," he hesitated for a moment, "I would like to see you again. Maybe we can have dinner somewhere more." Quiet. She looked at him in surprise. "Mr. Miller, I think that—" "Rodrigo." "Just Rodrigo. Rodrigo, you're very kind. But we come from completely different worlds. You saw what happened down there. The people in your social circle won't take this well." "To hell with the people in my social circle," he replied with a fervor that surprised her. "I haven't met someone as real as you in a long time." Marina finished her tea, feeling much better physically, but emotionally confused. There was something about this man that stirred feelings she had sworn never to allow again. "I need to go home," she finally said. "Emily is with the neighbor, and it's already past her bedtime. Let me take you. It's late for you to take public transport alone." "I live in New Jersey, Rodrigo. It's far." "I don't mind. In fact, I'd like to see where you live, if you allow me." Marina looked into his eyes and saw genuine sincerity. Against all her instincts of self-preservation, she nodded. "Okay, but just this once." As they prepared to leave, both knew that that night had changed something fundamental in their lives. The casual encounter at the party had transformed into something much more significant, and neither could imagine waking up the next day without thinking of the other. Rodrigo's black Mercedes-Benz glided smoothly over the George Washington Bridge, cutting through the New Jersey night under a starry sky. The soft sound of jazz playing on the sound system blended with the distant roar of the waves from the harbor. Marina observed the city lights reflecting on the water, still processing the surreal events of the night. "I can't believe I'm here," she murmured, more to herself than to him. David adjusted the rearview mirror to see her better. She had changed out of her catering uniform into a simple blouse and jeans that he had asked Carlos to arrange, but they were a bit loose due to her pregnancy. "Neither can I," he admitted. "I haven't felt this alive in 2 years, since Helena passed away." Marina turned to him, noticing for the first time the deep sadness his eyes carried, even when he smiled. "Your wife?" "Yes. Rare pancreatic cancer. The best doctors in the world. Experimental treatments. Everything money can buy. Nothing worked." His voice carried a pain that was still fresh. "The worst part is, I develop life-saving equipment every day, but I couldn't save the person I loved most." Marina instinctively reached out and touched his arm. The simple, spontaneous gesture made David shiver. "You can't blame yourself for that," she said softly. "Some destinies are beyond our control, no matter how much power or money we have. You speak like someone who's lost a lot." Marina withdrew her hand and looked out the window again. "I lost my father when I was 16, a sudden heart attack. He was a construction worker, working tirelessly to support our family. My mother always said he worked himself to death. And your mother? She lives in New Jersey with my younger brother. She didn't approve of my life choices. She said I was too independent, that I should have married young instead of chasing princess dreams." Marina laughed bitterly. Princess dreams were wanting to study nursing and have a profession. David frowned. "She doesn't support you?" "My mother comes from a generation where women marry, have children, and depend on their husbands. When I got pregnant with Emily out of wedlock, it was a scandal in the family. When I decided to raise my daughter alone, instead of accepting an arranged marriage with a distant cousin, well, I was practically disowned." "My God, Marina! How did you manage?" "A head nurse at the hospital, Sister Lucy, took me in. She helped me get a spot in a community daycare for Emily and encouraged me to continue my studies. She said I had too much talent to waste." They had arrived in New Jersey, and Marina guided him through the narrow streets of the Fonseca neighborhood. The simple houses contrasted sharply with the luxurious buildings of the Hamptons they had passed. "It's right at the corner, the blue house with the white gate," Marina pointed out. David parked in front of a modest but well-kept residence. There was a small garden in front with red roses and a low white fence. Even in the dim light of dawn, one could see the care with which the place was maintained. "It's small, but it's ours," Marina said proudly. "I managed to buy it 3 years ago with a housing loan. Emily has her own room, and I'm already preparing a little corner for the baby." Before they could get out of the car, the door of the house opened, and a black woman in her 60s appeared on the porch, wearing a floral robe and slippers. "Mrs. Johnson must be worried," Marina smiled. "She's more than a neighbor. She's like a mother to me and Emily." They got out of the car, and Mrs. Johnson approached with a mixed expression of relief and curiosity upon seeing the Mercedes-Benz. "Marina, my dear, I was worried. Emily woke up twice asking for her mommy," she said, hugging Marina affectionately before discreetly glancing at David. "I'm sorry for the delay, Mrs. Johnson. I had a little problem at work. But this gentleman helped me a lot." Marina hesitated for a moment. "Mrs. Johnson, this is David Miller. David, this is Mrs. Johnson, my second mother." David approached with a respectful smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Johnson. Marina has told me a lot about you on the way." Mrs. Johnson studied him with experienced eyes that had seen a lot in life. There was something about this elegant man that caught her attention, the way he looked at Marina with affection, his respectful demeanor. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Miller. Anyone who takes care of my Marina is welcome here," she said. but her voice carried a subtle, protective tone. "Mommy!" A cheerful little voice echoed from the door of the house. Emily came running, wearing pink pajamas with unicorn prints, her curly hair loose and her eyes still sleepy. Marina knelt to embrace her daughter, and David felt his heart tighten at the scene. The girl was a perfect miniature of Marina. The same green eyes, the same bright smile, the same sweet expression. "Why did Mommy take so long?" Emily asked, snuggling into her mother's arms. "Mommy had to work late today, Princess. But I promise we'll make pancakes for breakfast tomorrow, okay?" Emily nodded, but her curious eyes were fixed on David. She had inherited her mother's perceptiveness and immediately noticed that something was different that night. "Who is he, Mommy?" she asked bluntly, pointing at David. "This is Mr. David, Emily. He was very kind and helped me today." David bent down to be at the girl's level. "Hello, Emily. Your mommy told me you're very smart and brave." Emily looked at him seriously for a few seconds before smiling shyly. "You have a nice car. It's big." "Thank you, and you have a very special mommy. Take good care of her, okay?" The girl nodded gravely, as if she were receiving an important mission. "Well, I think it's time for everyone to rest," Mrs. Johnson diplomatically intervened. "Emily, let's let your mommy say goodbye to Mr. David." After Mrs. Johnson took Emily inside, Marina and David were left alone in the small garden. The scent of the roses mingled with the salty aroma of the sea breeze wafted from the bay. "Your daughter is absolutely beautiful," David said sincerely, "and very smart." "She is my world," Sarah smiled, touching her belly. "And soon there will be 2 worlds for me to care for." "Sarah, I would really love to see you again. Maybe we can take Emily to the zoo this weekend or to the park." Sarah hesitated. "David, you are an amazing person, but I need to be honest. I'm very afraid of getting emotionally involved again. It's not fair to me, nor to Emily, and especially not fair to you." "Why wouldn't it be fair to me?" "Because you deserve someone without baggage, without complications. Someone from your world who can accompany you to gala dinners and international trips. I have 2 kids, work impossible shifts, and my idea of fun is watching cartoons on Sunday morning." David stepped closer to her. "What if I told you that watching cartoons on Sunday morning is exactly the kind of fun I need in my life?" "You don't know what you're saying." "I do. I've spent the last 2 years living an empty life, surrounded by people who only care about my wealth. Tonight, talking to you, I remembered what it feels like to have a real connection with someone." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. "David, I can't afford to dream. I have too many responsibilities for that." "What if it wasn't a dream? What if it were real?" Before she could respond, he leaned in closer and gently kissed her forehead. The tender and respectful gesture made Sarah's heart race in a way she had forgotten was possible. "Think about what we talked about today," he said softly. "I'm not asking for an answer now. Just think about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, we both deserve to be happy." He returned to the car, but before getting in, he turned around one last time. "Sarah?" "Yes?" "Thank you for reminding me of what really matters in life." As the taillights of the Mercedes disappeared around the corner, Sarah stood in her garden, one hand over her racing heart and the other over her belly where her baby was gently moving, as if also touched by the magic of that unforgettable night. Mrs. Johnson appeared silently by her side. "That man is different, isn't he?" she observed with the wisdom of someone who had seen many men come and go in Sarah's life. "Very different," Sarah admitted, "and that scares me more than anything. Sometimes, my daughter, the best things in life come when we least expect them, and sometimes when we need to have the courage to believe again." Sarah looked at the woman who had become her chosen family and smiled through her tears. "Let's go inside. Emily must be waiting to tell me about her day." But as she walked toward the house, Sarah couldn't shake the scent of David's cologne from her mind, nor the feeling of safety she had felt in his arms. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to have someone to share not only the burdens of life, but also its joys. A week had passed since the night at the Plaza Hotel, and Sarah was trying in vain to get David out of her thoughts. St. Mary's Hospital was bustling with activity that Thursday morning, the eve of New Year's, with a higher-than-usual number of pediatric emergencies. Sarah was carefully adjusting the new heart monitor, ironically a device from Health Tech Innovations, when her colleague Patricia approached with an intrigued expression. "Sarah, there's a very elegant man at the reception asking for you," Patricia said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "He said it's about a donation for the hospital, but he specifically asked to speak with you." Sarah's heart raced. She had spent the whole week hoping David would call or show up, while simultaneously wishing that wouldn't happen. Her emotions were in constant conflict. Part of her desperately wanted to see him again, while the other, more rational part, insisted it would be better to forget that impossible encounter. An elegant man. Sarah tried to sound uninterested, but her hands trembled slightly as she checked the vital signs of little Gabriel, an 8-year-old boy hospitalized with pneumonia. "Very elegant, and very handsome too," Patricia winked. "Who is he, Sarah? And don't tell me he's just some acquaintance, because he's been waiting for you for 40 minutes. Sarah sighed, knowing she wouldn't be able to hide anything from Patricia, who had known her for 5 years and had an uncanny radar for detecting secrets. "It's complicated, Patty. I met him last week at the event I freelanced at the Plaza Hotel." "The Plaza Hotel?" Patricia's eyes widened. "Sarah, you hooked a big fish, huh?" "I didn't hook anything," Sarah protested, checking Gabriel's IV and adjusting his pillow. "It was just a casual encounter. I felt unwell during the service, and he helped me, that's all. Just that doesn't bring a man to the hospital on New Year's Eve to make donations, and specifically ask for a nurse." Patricia crossed her arms. "Go talk to him before Sister Lucy finds out and starts asking a million questions." Sarah knew Patricia was right. Sister Lucy, the head nurse who had become her mentor and mother figure, had a fierce, protective instinct and wouldn't hesitate to interrogate any man who showed up looking for her. "Can you keep an eye on my patients for a few minutes?" Sarah asked, already removing her disposable gloves. "Of course. And Sarah, take it easy. Men who make hospital donations on New Year's Eve are either very generous or very much in love, sometimes both." Sarah walked through the hospital corridors with her heart racing. St. Mary's was a public institution that miraculously functioned well thanks to the dedication of its staff, but the facilities showed signs of years of heavy use and a limited budget. The walls needed painting, the linoleum floor was worn in some areas, and there was always the constant concern about the lack of modern equipment. When she arrived at the reception, she found David chatting animatedly with Dr. Richard Smith, the medical director of the hospital. He was wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit and holding a leather portfolio, but his eyes lit up when he saw her approaching. "Sarah!" Dr. Richard turned with a radiant smile. "What a wonderful coincidence. Mr. Miller was telling me about the new equipment your company intends to donate to our pediatrics department, and when I mentioned that we have an exceptional nurse in this department, we discovered that you already know each other." Sarah tried to maintain her professional composure, but felt her face flush as she met David's intense gaze. "Mr. Miller," she greeted formally, "what a surprise to see you here." "Sarah," he smiled, and she noticed a difference in his voice, warmer, more intimate. "I was explaining to Dr. Richard about some equipment we developed specifically for pediatrics. When I learned that you worked here, I thought it would be interesting to get the opinion of someone who truly understands the practical needs of day-to-day operations." Dr. Richard looked back and forth between them with growing curiosity. "Well, I need to attend a meeting with the administrators, but Sarah can show you around our departments and explain which equipment would be most useful. Sarah, would you mind accompanying Mr. Miller?" Of course, Dr. Richard, Sarah nodded, knowing she had no way to refuse without seeming strange. After the director walked away, David and Sarah were left alone in the bustling reception area. Patients, families and staff moved around them, creating a constant atmosphere of activity typical of a public hospital. "Did you really come here to make donations?" Sarah asked, guiding him toward the elevator. "Yes," David replied, pressing the button for the 5th floor. "But I also came because I couldn't stop thinking about you." Sarah felt butterflies in her stomach, but kept her tone professional. "David, we talked about this." "I know, but spending an entire week without seeing you made me realize that I can't just pretend that night didn't happen." The elevator arrived, and they stepped inside. Sarah took advantage of the few seconds of silence to try to organize her thoughts. His presence in the hospital, her sacred space, where she felt competent and valued, created a confusing mix of emotions. "This is our pediatrics department," she said as they exited the elevator, returning to her professional mode. "We have 30 beds and treat children from the entire metropolitan area." They walked through the hallways, and Sarah noticed how David observed everything with genuine attention. Not just the equipment, but also the interactions between staff and patients, the conditions of the facilities, the small details that revealed the real needs of the hospital. "This monitor you donated last month has already saved several lives," Sarah commented, stopping in front of the room where Gabriel was hospitalized. "We were able to detect arrhythmias that would have gone unnoticed before." David approached the window of the room and watched the boy sleeping peacefully, connected to the monitor that his company had developed. A look of deep satisfaction crossed his face. "How old is he?" he asked softly. 8, Gabriel. "He arrived here 3 days ago with severe pneumonia. He's responding well to treatment, but he needs constant monitoring." "Can I meet him?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, then nodded. They entered the room quietly. Gabriel had woken up and was playing with a small, worn-out toy car. "Hi, Gabriel." Sarah approached the bed with a warm smile. "How are you feeling today?" "Better, Aunt Sarah." "When can I go home?" "Soon, dear. This is Mr. David. He helps make the machines that are taking care of you." Gabriel looked at David with curiosity. "You make those shiny machines?" David sat in the chair next to the bed, lowering himself to the boy's level. "I help make them, yes." "Do you like them?" "They're cool. They make funny noises," Gabriel laughed. "But Aunt Sarah said they know when my heart is sad and help it be happy again." Sarah felt her eyes welling up. She had explained to Gabriel in simple terms how the monitors worked, and his childlike perspective had turned medical technology into something magical. "Your mom is right," David said, his voice emotional. "And you know what else? You're very brave. Braver than many adults I know." Gabriel smiled proudly. "My mom said brave men take care of the people they love. Do you take care of someone, Mr. David?" The innocent question hit David like a bolt. His eyes met Sarah's over the child's head, and there was an intensity in that gaze that made her shiver. "I'm learning to care again," he replied, still looking at Sarah. After saying goodbye to Gabriel, they continued their tour of the hospital. Sarah showed other departments, explained specific needs, and David took detailed notes in a leather notebook. There was a naturalness in the way they worked together. She explaining practical needs, he asking relevant technical questions that showed deep medical knowledge. "How do you know so much about medicine?" Sarah asked when they stopped in the cafeteria for coffee. "I studied medicine before switching to biomedical engineering." David stirred sugar into his coffee. "After Helena got sick, I spent years researching treatments, consulting specialists. I learned much more about medicine than I would have liked." "That must have been very difficult." "It was, but it also gave me purpose. Every piece of equipment we develop, every life we help save, it's as if she's still with me, fighting to save others." Sarah lightly touched his hand on the table. "She would be proud of what you're doing." "I hope so." They sat in silence for a few moments, watching the bustle of the cafeteria, hospital staff on their breaks, some patient families having coffee, the constant buzz of conversations in English mixed with the occasional southern accent or Midwestern drawl. "Sarah," David broke the silence, "tomorrow is New Year's Eve. I know you probably have plans with Emily, but I would really love to spend New Year's Eve with you guys. Nothing fancy, just being together." Sarah hesitated. "David, I always spend New Year's Eve at Long Beach with Emily and Mrs. Johnson. It's our tradition, nothing glamorous. We bring homemade sandwiches, soda, and sit on the sand watching the fireworks." "That sounds perfect," he said sincerely. "Can I bring something? Maybe champagne for the adults?" "Are you sure you want to spend New Year's Eve sitting on the sand, eating bologna sandwiches?" David laughed. A genuine, warm sound that Sarah hadn't heard before. "Sarah, I've spent the last 2 New Year's Eves at expensive parties, surrounded by people I barely know, counting the minutes until I could leave. The idea of sitting on the sand with people I really care about, I can't imagine anything better." Sarah felt her heart race. "People you really care about?" "You and Emily," he said simply. "In 1 week, you two have become more important to me than anyone I've met in the last 2 years." Sarah looked into his eyes and saw absolute sincerity. Against all her instincts of self-preservation, against all the voices in her head screaming to be cautious, she nodded. "All right, but you will have to dress appropriately for the beach. No suits and ties." David smiled like a child who had just received the best Christmas gift. "I promised to wear flip-flops and shorts." When they said goodbye in the parking lot of St. Mary's Hospital, David kissed Sarah's forehead again, the same tender gesture from the previous week. But this time, Sarah didn't pull away. Instead, she allowed herself to enjoy for a few seconds the feeling of being cared for, of being important to someone. "See you tomorrow, Sarah." "See you tomorrow, David." As she watched his car disappear into the traffic of New Jersey, Sarah placed her hand on her belly, where her baby was moving actively. For the first time since she found out about the pregnancy, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she wouldn't be alone facing the challenges of motherhood. But along with that hope came fear. Fear of being disappointed again, fear of exposing Emily to another possible loss, fear that their different worlds were truly incompatible. Still, as she returned inside the hospital to finish her shift, Sarah found herself smiling. Tomorrow would be the first day of a new year, and for the first time in a long time, she was eager to discover what the future held for her. Long Beach was buzzing with activity on the night of December 31st. Whole families filled the sandy stretch with plastic chairs, makeshift coolers, and children running between the gentle waves of Long Island Sound. The aroma of shrimp skewers mingled with the salty breeze, while the sound of jazz and festive tunes echoed from various points along the beach. Sarah spread a floral beach towel on the ground, creating a cozy space for her small group. "Mommy, when is the handsome man going to arrive?" Emily asked for the 5th time, building a sandcastle with the dedication of a young architect. She wore a simple white dress that Sarah had bought especially for the occasion, one of the few times of the year she allowed herself an unnecessary expense. "Soon, Princess, and he has a name, Mr. David," Sarah smiled, applying sunscreen to her daughter's arms. At 8 months pregnant, every movement required more effort, but she felt radiant that night. She had chosen a flowing white dress that discreetly concealed her belly and highlighted her natural tan, which she maintained despite working so much. Mrs. Johnson watched Sarah with a knowing smile while organizing the sandwiches in the cooler. "Girl, it's been a while since I've seen you this excited. This man is stirring your heart, isn't he?" "Mrs. Johnson." Sarah blushed, adjusting the towel for the 3rd time. "You don't have to pretend with me, Sarah. I've known you for 5 years. I saw you date that Michael and I can recognize when you're really interested in someone. The older woman lowered her voice. "I just hope this one is different. You deserve someone who truly values you." Sarah was about to respond when she heard Emily shout excitedly, "He's here! He's here!" David was walking across the sand towards them, and Sarah had to suppress a laugh when she saw him. He had taken his casual dress code instructions very seriously, wearing navy shorts, a simple white t-shirt, and flip-flops. In his hands he carried a cooler and a bouquet of white roses. "Good evening, ladies," he said with a radiant smile as he approached the group. "Sorry for the delay. I had a little discussion with the doorman of my building about bringing champagne in my backpack." Emily ran to him, and he bent down to be at the girl's height. "Hi, Mr. David. Do you like my castle?" "It's beautiful, Emily. You have a lot of talent for architecture," he replied seriously, examining the sand structure with genuine attention. "Can I help you make a tower?" As Emily enthusiastically explained her architectural plans, David handed the roses to Sarah. "For you," he said simply, his eyes meeting hers. "Thank you. They are beautiful." Sarah felt the soft fragrance of the flowers. "You didn't have to." I wanted to do this," he gently interrupted her. "Mrs. Johnson, I brought champagne and grape juice to toast. I hope you like it." Mrs. Johnson studied him with the experienced eyes of someone who had raised 4 children and knew men of all kinds. "Very kind of you, Mr. David. Please sit with us and tell us more about yourself." David settled onto the beach towel, and Sarah noticed how he seemed genuinely relaxed, very different from the tense man she had met at the Plaza Hotel party. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing tanned forearms, and there was a lightness in his movements that she hadn't seen before. "So, Mr. David," Mrs. Johnson began her informal interrogation while distributing sandwiches. "Sarah told me you work with medical equipment." "Yes, I develop medical technology. It's a job. It gives me great pleasure, especially when I see how our equipment helps amazing professionals like Sarah save lives." Emily, who had just finished her tower, approached curiously. "Mr. David, do you have children?" Sarah felt David's body tense slightly beside her. It was an innocent question, but it touched on a still sensitive wound. "No, Emily. My wife and I wanted to have children, but she fell ill before we could realize that dream." The girl processed the information with the seriousness characteristic of children. "Did she die?" "Emily!" Sarah gently reprimanded her, but David signaled that it was okay. "Yes, she died. But you know what? Being here with you today reminds me that sometimes life gives us second chances to be happy." Emily nodded gravely, then moved closer to him. "When my dad left, I was very sad. But now I understand that sometimes people leave so that better people can come." The depth of the girl's observation surprised all the adults. David felt his eyes welling up and gently touched Emily's face. "You are very wise for a 5-year-old. My mommy says I'm as smart as she is." Emily smiled proudly. "And my mommy's baby will be smart too." "I'm sure of it." David looked at Sarah's belly. "When is the baby going to be born?" "In a few weeks," Sarah replied, instinctively placing her hand on her belly. "I'm both excited and nervous at the same time." "It's normal to be nervous," Mrs. Johnson said. "When I had my first child, I was so nervous that I forgot the bag on the way to the hospital." Everyone laughed, and the tension of the moment dissipated. The conversation flowed naturally as they shared sandwiches. David tried the bologna and tomato sandwich and declared it the best he had ever eaten, making Emily laugh and applaud. "Mr. David," the girl said after they finished eating, "do you know how to play paddleball?" "I haven't played in a long time, but I can try." "Let's play then. Mommy can't because she has the baby in her belly, but Mrs. Johnson said she will teach us to make better sandcastles." Sarah watched David play with Emily by the water's edge, and her heart tightened with emotion. He had taken off his shirt, revealing an athletic physique and some discreet scars on his chest, probably from some surgery. There was no hurry in his movements, no impatience typical of adults pretending to enjoy playing with children. He was genuinely having fun. "He's good with her," Mrs. Johnson commented, sitting beside Sarah. "Yes, he is. Emily is loving the male attention. She misses having a father figure." "And you? What do you miss?" Sarah looked at the woman who had become her confidant. Companionship, having someone to share worries and joys with, not having to be strong all the time. "Can this man give you that?" "I think so. But I'm scared, Mrs. Johnson." "What if he's like Michael? What if he decides he doesn't want all this responsibility?" Mrs. Johnson touched Sarah's arm. "My daughter, you can't live in fear of what might happen. Look how he is with Emily, how he looks at you. This man is not here out of obligation or pity. He is here because he wants to be." At that moment, Emily shouted from the water's edge, "Mommy! Mrs. Johnson! Come see! Mr. David taught me how to jump the waves." The two women got up and walked to the water. David was holding Emily's hands, helping her jump the small waves that broke on the sand. The girl was laughing loudly, her wet hair shining under the colourful lights that decorated the beach. "Be careful not to get too tired, Emily," Sarah warned affectionately. "I'm taking very good care of her," David smiled. "She's a great paddleball teacher, by the way." There were 2 hours until midnight when they returned to the blanket. Emily was visibly tired but happy, snuggling in Sarah's lap. David opened the bottle of champagne and poured a glass for each adult, filling a cup with grape juice for Emily. "A toast," he said, raising his glass, "to new friendships, new beginnings, and the special people who make life worth living." "Cheers," Sarah and Mrs. Johnson replied, clinking their glasses. "Cheers," Emily repeated, tapping her little cup against the adults' glasses. As they drank and chatted, Sarah watched David interacting with her little improvised family. He listened attentively to Mrs. Johnson's stories about her youth in Florida, asked insightful questions, and shared some memories of his own childhood in New Jersey. "My grandmother had a huge garden," he recalled, his eyes shining with the memory. "I spent whole afternoons there, playing hide-and-seek among the rose bushes. It was my favorite place in the world." "That's why you brought roses for Mommy," Emily observed sleepily. "Exactly. Roses always remind me of special moments." "Adieu." At 11:45 p.m., the beach began to prepare for the countdown. Families gathered at the water's edge, children ran with sparklers in their hands, and the atmosphere filled with anticipation and joy. "Mummy, can I make a wish for the new year?" Emily asked. "Of course, Princess, but remember that wishes are secrets." Emily closed her eyes in concentration and murmured something inaudible. When she opened her eyes again, she looked directly at David with a mysterious smile. "Done!" Sarah wondered what her daughter's wish could have been, but was interrupted by the start of the countdown. Thousands of voices joined in. 10, 9, 8. David moved closer to Sarah, offering her his hand to help her stand. 7, 6, 5. They stood side by side, looking at the sky where the first fireworks began to explode. 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year! The sky lit up with a cascade of colors, gold, red, blue, green, as the fireworks created magical shapes over Long Island Sound. The deafening sound of explosions mixed with the shouts of joy and applause from the crowd. David turned to Sarah, his eyes reflecting the colorful lights of the fireworks. Without saying a word, he gently kissed her lips, a soft, respectful kiss, but filled with promises. When they pulled away, Sarah saw tears of happiness in his eyes. "Happy New Year, Sarah." "Happy New Year, David." Emily, who had been watching everything with interest, clapped her hands. "You kissed, just like in the movies." Mrs. Johnson laughed heartily. "Curious girl, come here and give everyone a hug to celebrate the new year." They embraced in a group, an improvised but true family, united by the genuine affection that had blossomed between them. The fireworks continued to explode above their heads, but Sarah felt that the real spectacle was happening right there, in that circle of love and acceptance. When they finally separated, David held Sarah's hand in his. "Sarah, I want you to know that this was the most special New Year's Eve of my life in a long time." "It was for me too," she replied sincerely. "Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for letting me be a part of this." Ladill. As they gathered their things from the beach, Emily already sleeping in Mrs. Johnson's arms, Sarah felt that something fundamental had changed that night. It wasn't just the beginning of a new year, it was the start of a new possibility for happiness that she thought was lost forever. David carried Emily to the car, carefully settling her in the back seat. The little girl woke up for a few seconds and sleepily murmured, "Mr. David, can you come to our breakfast tomorrow?" Sarah was about to protest that he probably had other plans, but David responded first. "If your mommy invites me, I would love to." "Consider yourself invited," Sarah smiled. "I make the best pancakes in New Jersey. I can't wait to try them." When they said goodbye in front of Sarah's house, David kissed her forehead again, a gesture that was becoming his trademark. "Sleep well, Sarah. Dream of good things. You too." And David, thank you for making this night unforgettable. As she watched the tail lights of his car disappear down the street, Sarah placed her hand on her belly and felt the baby moving gently, as if also happy with the events of the night. "I think your little brother or sister approved of our special guest," she said to Emily, who was half asleep in her arms. "I knew he was special, Mommy. That's why I asked him to stay with us forever." Sarah felt her heart race as she understood what her daughter's New Year's wish had been. Maybe, just maybe, some wishes really did come true. The aroma of cinnamon and vanilla lingered in the small kitchen of Sarah's house. When David arrived on the morning of January 1st, it was 9 o'clock, and he was carrying a bouquet of sunflowers and a bag of fresh fruit from the finest grocery store in New Jersey. Through the kitchen window, he could see Sarah preparing the pancake batter, wearing a yellow apron that highlighted her loose brown hair cascading over her shoulders. Emily was the one who answered the door, still in her pajamas, but with bright, excited eyes. "Mr. David, Mommy is making special pancakes because you came." "Good morning, Emily. I brought some fruit to go with them." He bent down to greet her. "How did you sleep?" "I dreamed of fireworks and giant sandcastles." She took his hand and pulled him inside. Sarah's house was small but cozy, decorated with simple furniture and personal touches that made it special. Photographs of Emily at different ages adorned the walls, along with some of Sarah's diplomas carefully framed. In the corner of the living room, a small white crib was already set up, waiting for the arrival of the new baby. "Good morning." Sarah turned from the sink where she was washing the fruit, a shy smile lighting up her face. She wore a simple light blue dress that accentuated her 8-month belly. "You arrived just in time. The pancakes are almost ready." David approached and gently kissed her cheek, a gesture that was becoming natural between them. "Good morning. I slept thinking about this moment." "Really?" Sarah blushed slightly. "I hope you're not disappointed. My kitchen is nothing like the restaurants you must frequent." "Sarah." He gently held her face in his hands. "Stop comparing yourself to a world that doesn't matter to me. Being here in this kitchen with you and Emily is exactly where I want to be." Mrs. Johnson appeared in the kitchen, having entered through the back door as she always did. "Good morning, Mr. David. I see you brought strawberries. Emily will love that." "Good morning, Mrs. Johnson. I thought we could make a fruit salad to go with the pancakes." "A man who understands a balanced breakfast," she approved with a nod. "Sarah, you found one who has sense." They worked together in the small kitchen with surprising synchronicity. David washed and cut the fruit, while Sarah finished the pancakes and Emily set the table. Mrs. Johnson brewed fresh coffee and watched the interaction with experienced eyes. "Mr. David," Emily said as she placed colorful napkins around the table. "Do you know how to make pancakes?" "I can make a few things in the kitchen. My grandma taught me when I was little. She used to say that a man who can't cook will either starve or eat bad food." "Your grandma was smart," commented Mrs. Johnson. "Just like my mother. She always said that a good man is one who knows how to take care of home and family." Sarah watched David interact with her daughter and Mrs. Johnson, noticing how he naturally adapted to the environment. There was no condescension in his attitude, nor the discomfort that many men of his social class displayed in simpler settings. "All set," Sarah announced, placing a golden stack of pancakes in the center of the table. "I hope you like them. The recipe is from my maternal grandmother." They sat around the small round table, and David took the first bite with genuine attention, his eyes closed for a moment, savoring. "Sarah, this is honestly the best pancake I've ever had in my life." "You don't have to exaggerate," she laughed, but her face lit up with the compliment. "I'm not exaggerating. It tastes like home, like love." Emily clapped her hands. "Mommy cooks with love. I always help, right, Mommy?" "Always, Princess. You're my official sous chef." During breakfast, the conversation flowed naturally. David shared funny stories from his childhood in Asheville. Sarah reminisced about her youth in Charleston, and Emily asked curious questions that drew laughter from everyone. "Mommy," Emily suddenly said, "when the baby is born, can Mr. David visit us at the hospital?" Sarah nearly choked on her orange juice. Her daughter's innocent question had touched on territory she wasn't ready to fully explore. "Emily, Mr. David is a very busy person." "Actually," David gently interrupted, "I would love to be there when your little brother or sister is born, if your mommy doesn't mind." Sarah felt her heart race. You really would?" "More than anything," he replied, his eyes meeting hers. "If you let me." Mrs. Johnson exchanged a meaningful glance with Sarah. "Well, I think it's time for me to let you two talk alone. Emily, how about we go feed the birds in the backyard?" "But I wanted to hear more stories from Mr. David." "You'll hear more later, sweetie. Let's go." After Mrs. Johnson and Emily left, Sarah and David were alone in the kitchen. The silence stretched for a few moments, filled with unspoken things. "David," Sarah began hesitantly, "I need to be honest with you about some things." "I'm listening." Sarah stood up and walked to the window, watching Emily play in the small backyard. "I'm scared, very scared." "Of what?" "Of falling in love with you, of letting Emily fall in love with you, of building a family in my head and then finding out it was just my illusion." David stepped closer behind her, gently placing his hands on her shoulders. "Sarah, look at me." She turned, and he saw tears forming in her green eyes. "I'm not Michael. I won't disappear when things get tough. I won't abandon you because of responsibilities or because our situation is complicated." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I spent 2 years living an empty life, Sarah. Meeting you and Emily reminded me of what really matters. I'm not here out of pity or whim or because I have nothing else to do. I'm here because you two changed my life." Sarah wiped away a tear that had escaped. "But we're from such different worlds, David. You have a sophisticated life, travel, important business. I have diapers to change, pediatric appointments, sleepless nights with a crying baby. And you think I care about that?" He cupped her face gently. "Sarah, I want the sleepless nights. I want to change diapers. I want to wake up in the middle of the night to prepare a bottle. I want to teach your children to ride bikes and swim. I want to be present for all the little things that make a family, even knowing the baby isn't yours. This baby will be mine in my heart from the moment it's born if you let me, and Emily too. Love isn't about DNA, Sarah. It's about choice, commitment, being present." Sarah felt more tears streaming down. "I want to believe that, I really do." "Then believe it. Give us a chance. Give me a chance to prove I'm different." At that moment, Emily burst into the kitchen. "Mommy, Mrs. Johnson said you were crying. Did Mr. David make you sad?" No, Princess. Sarah knelt down with difficulty to be at her daughter's height. Mommy is crying happy tears. Like when you cry watching a princess movie. Exactly. Emily looked at David seriously. Mister. David, do you want to be part of our family? The girl's direct and innocent question caught both adults by surprise. David knelt to be at her level. Emily, I would love to be part of your family, but that's a decision your mommy needs to make. Emily turned to Sarah. Mommy, can he stay? Sarah looked at her daughter, then at David, and felt as if she were on the edge of a cliff. She could retreat to the safety of the life she knew, or she could take a leap of faith towards something completely new. He can stay, she said softly, if he wants to. David stood up and kissed her, a deeper kiss than the one from the night before, full of promises and mutual commitments. Emily clapped her hands and shouted with joy, running to the backyard to share the news with Mrs. Johnson. When they separated, David rested his forehead against hers. Thank you for giving me this chance. Thank you for wanting to stay. Sarah, there's something I need to tell you. What? Next week, I have a very important meeting. A group of American investors is interested in buying my company. It's a proposal that could change everything. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Change how? The offer involves moving the company's headquarters to the United States. It would be an incredible opportunity to expand our reach, to take our technology to hospitals around the world. Are you going to accept? David hesitated for a moment. 2 weeks ago, I would have said yes without thinking twice. But now I have very important reasons to stay in the U.S. Sarah placed her hand on her belly, where the baby was moving actively, as if also nervous about the conversation. David, I don't want you to turn down opportunities because of me. That wouldn't be fair. And it wouldn't be fair to me to accept an opportunity that would take me away from the people I love the most. The word love hung in the air. It was the first time either of them had used that word, and its weight was almost tangible. You love me, Sarah whispered. I'm learning to love again, he replied honestly. And yes, I think I love you, Sarah. I love your strength, your dedication, your ability to find joy in the simple things. I love how you care for people, how you raised Emily to be so special. I love how you make me feel whole again. Sarah felt as if her heart might explode with happiness and terror at the same time. I'm also learning to love again. They stood embraced in the small kitchen, surrounded by the aroma of pancakes and the sound of laughter from Emily in the backyard. It was a perfect moment, but Sarah couldn't completely shake the worry about the future. The differences between their worlds still existed, and she knew the coming months would test the strength of this newly discovered love. But for the first time in years, she chose to focus on the present, on the warmth of David's arms around her, the genuine happiness in his eyes, the real possibility that maybe, finally, she had found someone who would stay. The conference room on the 35th floor of the corporate building in New Jersey had a panoramic view of the city. David adjusted his tie for the third time as he watched the flow of cars below, trying to calm his nerves before the most important meeting of his career. Beside him, Edward Miller, his partner and best friend since college, flipped through documents with a worried expression. David, are you sure you don't want to reconsider the Americans' proposal? Edward asked, lowering his voice even though they were alone in the room. We're talking about $500 million. That's money for 3 generations to live comfortably. It's not about the money, Edward, David replied, watching a seagull glide over the lagoon. It's always been about making a difference, and I can make more of a difference here in the U.S. Since when did you get so patriotic? Edward raised an eyebrow. A month ago you were excited about the possibility of expanding into the American market. David turned to his friend, knowing it was time to be completely honest. Since I met someone special, someone who made me rethink my priorities. Oh, Edward leaned back in his chair. The pregnant nurse from the Plaza Hotel party. How do you know about that? David, you're one of the most sought-after businessmen in New Jersey. Did you think no one would notice you leaving with a pregnant woman on New Year's Eve? Edward sighed. People are talking, and not in a positive way. Before David could respond, the door opened, and 3 impeccably dressed men and a woman entered. Robert Harrison, the CEO of the American group wanting to buy Health Tech Innovations, was a 60-year-old man with grey hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Beside him, James Mitchell, the CFO, carried a leather briefcase that likely contained documents that could change David's life. "David, good to see you again," Harrison greeted with a firm handshake. "We hope you've considered our proposal carefully." "Of course, Robert, thank you for your patience." They sat around the mahogany table, and Mitchell immediately opened his briefcase. "David, our offer remains the same. $500 million for Health Tech Innovations, with you retaining a 30% stake and taking on the role of global CTO. It would be a unique opportunity to bring your technology to first-world hospitals." "It's a generous offer," David admitted. "But I have some concerns." "Related to what?" asked Sarah Collins, the group's legal consultant. "To the commitment to the American market. You mentioned that production would be moved to the United States. What would happen to our contracts here in the US? Harrison exchanged a quick glance with Mitchell. "Well, naturally there would be a transition. Some contracts could be maintained, but our priority would be to focus on more lucrative markets. More lucrative markets than saving lives in public hospitals." "David," Edward diplomatically intervened, "maybe we could discuss ways to maintain some local commitments even with the change." "Actually," Harrison leaned forward, "there's another matter we'd like to address. We've heard some information about your recent personal life." David felt his blood run cold. "My personal life is irrelevant to this negotiation." "It is when it can affect the company's image," Mitchell retorted. "A CEO involved with a complicated situation can create public relations problems." Complicated situation. David's voice carried a dangerous chill. "David," Sarah tried to soften, "we understand you may be going through a difficult time since your wife's passing. Sometimes we make choices that don't reflect our best judgment." "You're referring to Sarah?" "The pregnant nurse, yes," Harrison nodded. "Look, we're not judging. Men in your position often get involved with women from different social classes, but for a company of our size, we need leaders with an impeccable image." David slowly stood up, his expression turning cold. "Let me understand. You're suggesting that my relationship with a dedicated nurse who saves lives every day is an image problem." "David, be reasonable," Edward tried to mediate. "Maybe we can find a solution." "The solution is simple," David interrupted, gathering his documents. "I refuse your proposal." "Don't be hasty," Harrison stood up as well. "We're willing to negotiate." "There's nothing to negotiate. You just insulted the woman I love and demonstrated exactly the kind of mindset I don't want associated with my company. You're making a $500 million mistake over a fling," Mitchell said disdainfully. David took 2 steps toward the man, his voice low and controlled. "If you refer to Sarah that way again, this meeting will end in a much less civilized manner." "David!" Edward stepped between them. "Let's all take a deep breath." "No, Edward, the meeting is over." David headed for the door. "Thank you for your interest, but Health Tech Innovations is not for sale to people who judge someone's worth by their social class." Harrison made one last attempt. "David, you're letting emotions cloud your business judgment. Think about the future of your company." "I'm thinking about the future, and my future is here in the US with the people who truly matter." David left the room, leaving a tense silence behind. Edward followed him through the hallways of the building. "David, wait! You just turned down $500 million, and I don't regret it one bit. That's crazy, over a woman you've known for 2 weeks. David stopped abruptly and turned to his friend. "Edward, you've known me for 20 years. When was the last time you saw me genuinely happy? Edward hesitated. Before Helena died. Exactly. And do you know when I felt happy again? On New Year's Eve, sitting on the sand at Long Beach, eating bologna sandwiches with Sarah, Emily, and Mrs. Johnson. For the first time in 2 years, I remembered what it was like to have a family. But David, Edward, I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I have a thriving company, international recognition. But do you know what I didn't have? Purpose, love, a reason to wake up in the morning besides making more money. They walked to the elevator in silence. When the doors closed, Edward sighed. You really love this woman. I do. I love her, and I love Emily. And I will love the baby that is coming. I won't let anyone make me feel ashamed of that. And what if the partners question your decision? Then I'll explain that sometimes the best business decisions are the ones that keep our souls intact. As he drove back to New Jersey, David called Sarah. She answered on the second ring, and just the sound of her voice was enough to dissipate all the tension from the meeting. Hi, David. How was the meeting? I rejected the offer. There was silence on the other end of the line. Why? It was an incredible opportunity for you. It was an opportunity that would take me away from you, and that's not an option. David, I don't want you to sacrifice your future for me. Sarah, you are my future. You, Emily, and the baby that is coming. The rest are just numbers in a bank account. Sarah was at the hospital, taking a break between patients to answer the call. Her colleagues noticed the tears in her eyes when she hung up. Are you okay, Sarah? Asked Patricia. I think so. Sarah smiled through her tears. Actually, I think everything is perfect. That night, when David arrived at Sarah's house for dinner, he found Emily playing in the yard, while Sarah prepared a fruit smoothie in the kitchen. She looked visibly tired. The end of her pregnancy was taking its toll. How are you feeling? He asked, gently massaging her shoulders. Heavy, anxious, with swollen feet, she laughed, but happy, very happy. Sarah, I need to tell you something about the meeting today. She turned, concerned by the serious tone of his voice. What happened? David told her about the comments from the American investors, how they referred to her and their relationship. He saw Sarah's expression gradually close off. I knew this would happen, she finally said, leaning against the sink. What? The people in your world will never accept a woman like me. A nurse, pregnant, from a lower middle-class background. They will always see me as a gold digger or a fling. Sarah, it doesn't matter what they think. It does matter, David. It will matter in business, in social circles, in the decisions you need to make. I can't be a burden in your life. David took her by the arms, forcing her to look into his eyes. Sarah Johnson, you listen to what I'm going to say. You are not a burden. You are my strength. Those people do not represent my world. They represent a world I no longer want to be a part of. But the professional repercussions... Let the professional repercussions be damned. I would rather build a smaller, more humane company with values I respect than associate with people who judge someone's worth by their bank account. Emily appeared in the kitchen at that moment, sensing the tension in the air. Mommy, why are you crying again? Sarah knelt down with difficulty to be at her daughter's level. Sometimes adults worry about silly things, Princess. Can Mr. David make you stop worrying? David knelt beside them. Emily, I can try, but your mommy needs to believe that some things are worth fighting for, even when it gets tough. Like when I really wanted that expensive doll and mommy worked extra to buy it. Exactly like that. Sarah looked at her daughter, then at David, and felt as if she was seeing clearly for the first time in weeks. Emily was right. Some things were worth fighting for. All right, she said softly. Let's fight together, but I want you to promise me one thing. Anything. If you ever regret it, if you realize you would be happier another way, tell me. Don't stay with me out of obligation or pity. David kissed her forehead with infinite tenderness. Sarah, the only regret I could ever have would be letting you slip out of my life again. That night, after Emily fell asleep, Sarah and David sat on the small sofa in the living room, her back resting against his legs, their hands intertwined over her belly, where the baby was moving actively. "David," she said softly, "I want you to know that no matter what happens, knowing you has changed my life for the better. It has for me too, Sarah, for so much better." As they talked about plans for the future, about names for the baby, about how David could be more involved in Emily's life, neither of them imagined that in less than 48 hours, their lives would be tested again in ways they could never imagine. Outside the small house in New Jersey, a storm was approaching, bringing strong winds and rain that heralded changes ahead. But inside, protected by the warmth of their newly discovered love, they felt ready to face any challenge that fate might present. The dawn of January 15th brought one of the worst storms New Jersey had seen in decades. Winds of over 60 miles per hour lashed the city, while torrential rains turned streets into rivers and uprooted century-old trees. Sarah woke up at 3 in the morning with a strong contraction that made her double over, gasping. "It can't be now," she murmured, looking out the window at the storm that was transforming her quiet street into an apocalyptic scene. There are still 3 weeks to go. Another contraction, more intense than the first, made her groan involuntarily. Emily, who had been sleeping beside her due to the frightening thunder, woke up startled. "Mommy, are you in pain?" Sarah tried to breathe deeply, remembering the techniques she had learned in her childbirth preparation class. "Princess, I think your little brother or sister is in a hurry to meet you." Emily's eyes widened. "Is the baby coming now? But it's raining so much." Sarah grabbed her phone with trembling hands and dialed David's number. He answered on the first ring, his voice immediately alert. "Sarah, is everything okay?" "David," she managed to say between a contraction that was starting, "I think I'm in labor. The contractions are coming every 5 minutes. I'm on my way now." She could hear him moving, probably getting dressed. "Can you make it to the hospital?" Sarah looked out the window again. The street was flooded, and she could see fallen branches blocking the way. "David, I don't know if we can get out of here. The street is completely blocked." "Don't worry. I'll find a way. Call Mrs. Johnson and the hospital. Let them know we're coming." Mrs. Johnson arrived in less than 5 minutes, soaked from head to toe and carrying a powerful flashlight. The power had gone out throughout the neighborhood. "My daughter, how are you?" she asked, lighting candles around the house. "The contractions are getting stronger," Sarah admitted, holding onto the kitchen table during another wave of pain. "Mrs. Johnson, what if we can't get to the hospital?" "Calm down, Sarah. I've helped bring 7 children into the world before you were born. We'll figure it out." Emily watched everything with wide eyes, hugging her teddy bear. "Mommy, are you scared?" Sarah knelt with difficulty and held her daughter's face in her hands. "A little bit, Princess. But you know what? I'm really excited to meet our baby." Outside, the sound of a powerful engine cut through the sound of the rain. David had managed to arrive in his SUV, one of the few vehicles capable of navigating the flooded streets. He entered the house, drenched, carrying a medical bag. "How did you get through?" Mrs. Johnson asked. "I came down Main Street and cut through the country club grounds. It wasn't easy, but I made it." He knelt beside Sarah, who was sitting on the couch, breathing heavily. "How are you, love?" The word love, spoken so naturally in the midst of the crisis, made Sarah's heart race even faster. "The contractions are now every 3 minutes. David checked his watch and grabbed his phone. "I'm going to call Dr. Richard. He lives here in New Jersey and can guide us." While David spoke with the doctor, another contraction hit Sarah with overwhelming force. She involuntarily screamed, startling Emily, who began to cry. Mommy is in so much pain." Mrs. Johnson immediately picked Emily up. "Princess, your mommy is okay. The baby wants to be born, and it hurts a little, but soon everything will be fine." David hung up the phone with a worried expression. "Dr. Richard is trying to get here, but his street is also blocked. He said he can guide us over the phone if necessary. Necessary for what? Sarah asked, although she already knew the answer. To deliver the baby right here. A heavy silence settled in the room, broken only by the sound of the storm outside. Sarah felt another contraction starting and clutched David's hand. "I can't have the baby at home," she said between gasps. "What if something goes wrong?" "Sarah, look at me." David held her face in his hands. "I studied medicine. I know how to perform an emergency delivery. Dr. Richard will guide us over the phone. You're not alone." Mrs. Johnson sat Emily down in a chair with some coloring books. "Emily, you are going to be the official assistant for your little brother's birth. Can you take care of the candles for us?" The girl nodded seriously, happy to have an important task. For the next 2 hours, the small house transformed into an improvised maternity ward. David boiled water, sterilized towels, and prepared everything that might be needed, following Dr. Richard's detailed instructions over the phone. Mrs. Johnson massaged Sarah's back and helped her with breathing exercises, while Emily kept the candles lit and offered water to her mother. "Sarah, you need to move," David gently said when he noticed the contractions were practically continuous. "The baby is almost here." "I can't," Sarah cried, exhausted from the pain and effort. "David, I'm so scared." He sat behind her on the bed, allowing her to lean against his chest. "Love, you are the strongest woman I know. You take care of sick children every day. You raised Emily practically on your own. You can do this." "Mommy," Emily approached the bed with her teddy bear. "Can you hold Teddy? He always makes me feel brave." Sarah took her daughter's worn toy and hugged it to her chest. The sweetness of the gesture gave her strength, renewed strength. "All right," she said, her voice more resolute. "Let's do this." Dr. Richard continued giving instructions over the phone, which was on speaker so everyone could hear. "Sarah, on the next contraction, I want you to push. David, are you seeing the baby's head?" "Yes," David replied, his voice filled with emotion and concentration. "I can see it." "One more, Sarah," encouraged Mrs. Johnson. "Your baby wants to meet the whole family." With one last superhuman effort, Sarah pushed and felt an immediate sense of relief. The strong, healthy cry of a baby echoed through the house, blending with the sound of the rain that was finally beginning to subside. "It's a girl," David announced, tears streaming down his face as he carefully held the little creature. "Sarah, we have a perfect girl." Emily climbed onto the bed and watched her little sister with total fascination. "She's so tiny. Can I touch her?" "With great care," Sarah said, still catching her breath as David placed the baby in her arms. The girl had dark, wet hair, closed eyes, and cried with impressively strong lungs for someone born 3 weeks early. "She's perfect, Doctor," Richard murmured over the phone, having heard the cries. "Congratulations to everyone. David, now you need to cut the umbilical cord." With steady but emotional hands, David followed the medical instructions. It was a surreal moment. He was helping to bring into the world the baby of the woman he loved amidst a storm that had isolated them from the outside world. "What are we going to name her?" Emily asked, gently touching her little sister's tiny hand. Sarah looked at David, who had become an essential part of this most intimate and important moment of her life. "Hope," she said softly. "Let's name her Hope." "Why Hope?" Emily asked. "Because she was born on a stormy night, but she brought light to our family," Sarah replied, looking directly into David's eyes. "And because sometimes the best things in life come when we least expect them." David kissed Sarah's forehead with infinite tenderness. "Hope Johnson Miller." "Miller?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "If you'll allow me," David said gently, "I would like her to carry my name too, and Emily as well if you want." Mrs. Johnson wiped tears from her eyes. "I've never seen a more beautiful birth in my life." As the storm subsided outside, the makeshift family snuggled in bed. Emily had fallen asleep leaning against David's arm, while Sarah breastfed Hope for the first time. The baby had calmed down and seemed perfectly content with her dramatic entrance into the world. "David," Sarah said softly, "thank you for being here, for taking care of us." "Thank you for letting me be a part of this," he replied, gently tracing his finger over Hope's little face. "It was the most incredible moment of my life, even though it was so different from births in fancy hospitals, especially because it was so different. This was real, Sarah. It was our family creating its own story." When the sun rose a few hours later, it found a scene of perfect tranquility in the small house in New Jersey. The storm had passed, leaving behind a washed and renewed world, and in the midst of it, a family that had formed not through social conventions or expectations, but through love, courage, and the willingness to face any storm life could bring together. Doctor. Richard arrived around 9 in the morning to examine mother and baby, declaring both perfectly healthy. "David, you did an excellent job. Have you ever considered going back to medicine?" "No," David smiled, watching Sarah teach Emily how to hold her little sister properly. "I found my true calling right here." 3 weeks after Hope's birth, life had settled into a sweet and chaotic routine in the New Jersey home. David had practically moved in, transforming the small guest room into his makeshift office, where he managed the business of health tech innovations between bottle feedings and diaper changes. Sarah was on maternity leave, enjoying every moment with her 2 daughters, but also battling the typical exhaustion of a new mother. It was a sunny afternoon in February when the tranquility was abruptly interrupted. Sarah was breastfeeding Hope on the porch while Emily played in the garden when a black luxury car parked in front of the house. An elegant woman in her 50s stepped out of the car, her high heels clicking on the cobblestone sidewalk. "Mommy, who is that lady?" Emily asked, running to the porch. Sarah felt her stomach tighten as she recognized Beatrice Miller, David's mother, from the photographs she had seen in society magazines. The woman wore a beige Chanel suit and carried a handbag that cost more than Sarah's annual salary. Her blonde hair was impeccably styled, and even from a distance, Sarah could feel the critical gaze analyzing her. "Good afternoon," Beatrice said as she reached the gate, her voice polite but cold. "You must be Sarah. I'm Beatrice Miller, David's mother." Sarah carefully stood up, adjusting Hope in her arms. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Miller. David didn't tell me you were coming." "David doesn't know I'm here. We need to talk." Emily hid behind Sarah's legs, instinctively sensing the tension in the air. "You can come in," Sarah said reluctantly, opening the gate. Beatrice entered the small living room, her eyes scanning every detail of the simple decor. Her expression did not reveal open disapproval, but Sarah could feel the silent judgment. "A cozy house," Beatrice commented, sitting on the edge of the armchair, as if fearing contamination. "Thank you. Can I offer you some coffee?" "That won't be necessary. I don't intend to stay long." Beatrice elegantly crossed her legs. "Sarah, I'll be direct. I know my son has been involved with you and your daughters, and I believe you are a decent person. But we need to be realistic about the situation." Sarah felt hope stir in her arms and adjusted her better. "What situation, Mrs. Miller?" "David has been going through a tough time since Helen died. It's natural for him to seek comfort, but he has responsibilities, a name to uphold, a social position to maintain. He seems very aware of his responsibilities." Beatrice opened her bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "We received a revised proposal from the American investors. They are willing to increase the offer to $600 million and allow David to maintain limited operations in Brazil." Sarah looked at the document without touching it. "And what does this have to do with me?" "Everything. The only condition is that David maintains an appropriate public image, a successful single man, or married to someone from the same social circle." Beatrice paused deliberately. "You understand what I'm saying?" "I understand that you want me to exit his life. I'm suggesting that you consider what is best for David, and also for you. I know you must have financial needs, with 2 small children." Beatrice took a checkbook out of her bag. $500,000 would be enough for you to start over somewhere else, perhaps return to Charleston, near your family. Sarah felt anger rise from her stomach to her throat, but kept her voice steady for Emily, who was watching everything with wide eyes. "You're trying to buy me off. I'm offering a solution that benefits everyone. David can move on with his life. You have financial security for your daughters. And my feelings, his feelings." Beatrice sighed impatiently. "Sarah, you seem to be intelligent. You must realize that this relationship has no real future. You come from different worlds. Eventually David will see that and move on. Wouldn't it be better to end things now, with dignity?" At that moment, the front door opened and David entered, carrying grocery bags. His smile completely faded when he saw his mother in the living room. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "David, dear." Beatrice stood up, quickly putting away the checkbook. "I came to meet your friend." Sarah watched the conflict settle in David's eyes. He looked from his mother to her, noticing the evident tension in the room. "Sarah, is everything okay?" he asked, stepping closer and gently kissing her forehead. "Your mother and I were just talking." Beatrice observed the intimate gesture with barely concealed disapproval. "David, I need to speak with you privately. Anything you have to say can be said in front of Sarah." "I would prefer—" "Mom." David's voice carried a firmness that Sarah had never heard before. "Sarah is part of my life now. There are no secrets between us." Beatrice sighed dramatically. "Very well. David, I received a call from Harrison today. They are willing to reconsider the proposal with even better conditions. I already told you I'm not interested. $600 million, David, and they will allow limited operations in Brazil. At what cost?" Beatrice hesitated. "They want guarantees that your public image will be appropriate." David understood immediately. Appropriate means without Sarah. "David, be sensible." "No." His voice cut through the air like a blade. "I'm not discussing this." Beatrice turned to Sarah. "See how he is harming himself because of you, a smart man making emotional decisions." Sarah felt as if she had been slapped. The implicit criticism that she was a mistake, an obstacle to David's success, struck at her deepest insecurities. "Maybe," she said softly, "your mother is right about some things." "Sarah, no." David turned to her, alarmed. "David, you have already given up so much for me. A proposal of $600 million. It's money, Sarah, just money. It's not just money when it can determine the future of your company, the jobs you create, the lives your equipment saves." Beatrice smiled triumphantly. "See, she understands the reality of the situation. Mum, leave my house now." "This is not your house, David. It's hers." Beatrice grabbed her bag. "When you come to your senses, we will be waiting." After Beatrice left, a heavy silence settled in the room. Emily, sensing the tension, went to her room to play. David sat heavily on the sofa, running his hands through his hair. "Sarah, you can't listen to what my mother said." "And what if she's right?" Sarah sat beside him, hope sleeping peacefully in her arms. "David, $600 million. I don't care about the money. You should care. It's not just about you. It's about all the patients who could benefit from better equipment, about the jobs, about the impact your company can have. And about us? About our family?" Sarah felt tears forming. "David, I love you. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone again. But I can't live knowing that I'm an obstacle to your dreams. You are not an obstacle. You are my dream. Today I am. But what about 5 years from now, and 10, when you look back and realize everything you could have achieved?" David stood up and began to pace the room. "Sarah, you are letting fear speak louder than love. I'm being practical. Your mother is right about one thing. We come from very different worlds, and this world will never accept me. I don't need them to accept me. You do to thrive professionally, to be respected in your circles, for your company to grow as it deserves. David stopped in front of her and knelt down. Sarah, look at me. Do you really believe I would be happier without you? I believe you would be more successful. And is that more important than happiness? Sarah touched his face tenderly. Sometimes, yes. Sometimes we make sacrifices for the people we love. I won't accept that sacrifice. Maybe it's not your choice. They stared at each other in silence, both feeling as if they were on the edge of a precipice. The love between them was real and deep, but the external pressures felt overwhelming. Sarah, David finally said, I need time to think, to find a solution that allows us to be together without me having to give up everything I've worked for. And I need time to decide if I'm strong enough to face a world that will always see me as inadequate. That night, David returned to his apartment in Long Beach for the first time in weeks. Sarah's house felt empty and cold without her presence, but she knew they both needed space to think clearly. While breastfeeding Hope in the early morning hours, Sarah looked out the window at the stars over Long Island Sound. She had an important decision to make, one that could determine not only her future, but the future of her daughters, and the man she had learned to love with all the intensity of her wounded heart. The question that haunted her was simple yet devastating. Sometimes, does loving someone mean letting them go? The Office of Health Tech Innovations in downtown Rio de Janeiro had never felt so cold and impersonal to David. It was a March morning, 2 weeks after his mother's visit, and he hadn't spoken to Sarah since then. A mutual decision for both to reflect on the future. The absence of her and the girls felt like a hole in his chest that grew larger each day. Edward entered the room with a worried expression, carrying a folder full of documents. David, we need to talk. The situation is getting complicated. What situation? David asked, averting his gaze from the photo of Sarah and Hope that he discreetly kept on his desk. 3 of our biggest clients cancelled contracts this week. Rumors about instability in the company, about you being distant from the business. Edward sat down heavily. And there's more. The Americans leaked to the press that they made a $1 million offer that you turned down for personal reasons. David closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the consequences of his decisions. What are the newspapers saying? That you're going through a personal crisis, that you might be losing focus on the business. The market is nervous, David. The company's stock has dropped 20%. And the people, our employees, worried about their jobs. Some have already started looking for other opportunities. David stood up and walked to the window that overlooked Long Island Sound. From there, he could see New Jersey in the distance, where Sarah was likely taking care of Hope and preparing to return to work at the hospital. Edward, answer me this. Do you think I'm being irresponsible? I think you're being human. But sometimes, being human and being a good CEO are conflicting things. At that moment, David's secretary entered with an urgent expression. Mr. Miller, there's an important call from Dr. Richard Smith at St. Mary's Hospital. David answered immediately, his heart racing at the thought that something might have happened to Sarah or Hope. Dr. Richard, is everything okay? David, it's not an emergency, but I need to speak with you urgently. Can you come to the hospital today? It's about Sarah, and something that might be of great interest to your company. An hour later, David was in the office of the medical director at St. Mary's Hospital. Doctor, Richard seemed excited in a way that contrasted with the gravity in his voice over the phone. David, first I want you to know that Sarah doesn't know I'm talking to you. In fact, she made me promise not to interfere in her personal matters. How is she? David couldn't hide the anxiety in his voice. Physically well, emotionally, well, you can imagine. Dr. Richard leaned forward. But that's not why I called you. There's something you need to know about Sarah's work here at the hospital. Her work. For the past 2 years, Sarah has developed a revolutionary protocol for pediatric intensive care. A combination of nursing techniques, strategic use of medical technology, and psychological approach that has reduced infant mortality in our ICU by 40%. David straightened in his chair. 40%? And that's not all. Her protocol, combined with your company's equipment, has created a care model that is being studied by American and European universities. We've received proposals from 3 international hospitals wanting to implement the Silver Protocol. Silver Protocol? That's what the doctors started calling it. Sarah is too modest to promote her own work, but she created something extraordinary. And she did it using primarily equipment from health tech innovations. David felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. She never told me this. Of course she didn't. Sarah would never mix personal life with professional like that. But David, if you documented and systematized her work, if you developed a line of equipment specifically to implement the Silver Protocol, you would not only save your company, but revolutionize pediatric care worldwide. And would Sarah agree to this? Dr. Richard smiled sadly. Sarah loves her work more than anything, except her daughters, and maybe you. But she's planning to request a transfer to Charleston. She wants to be closer to family. David's heart stopped for a moment. When? Next week. She's already talked to a hospital there. She said she needs a fresh start. David left the hospital with his mind in turmoil. He drove aimlessly through the streets of Rio, processing everything he had discovered. Sarah was not only the woman he loved, she was, unknowingly, the key to saving everything he had worked for. More importantly, she was planning to leave. That afternoon, David parked in front of Sarah's house in New Jersey. He found her in the garden, Hope sleeping in a stroller while she watered the rose bushes they had planted together weeks before. Emily was at school. David, she said softly, without surprise. She had been waiting for this moment. How are you? Sarah, don't go to Charleston. She stopped watering the plants and turned to him. How did you know? Dr. Richard told me about your transfer, about the Silver Protocol, about everything. Sarah sighed and sat on the wooden bench that David had installed in the garden. He shouldn't have, having done that. You should have. Sarah, you created something revolutionary and didn't even tell me. Because it's not about you, David. It's about my work, my career. I didn't want you to think I was trying to influence your decisions. David sat down next to her. And you didn't want me to know that you're the solution to all my professional problems? I'm not the solution to anything. I'm the problem, remember? Sarah, listen. Americans want to buy my company because of the technology. But what if I had something better to offer? What if we had a revolutionary protocol that they can't replicate because it was developed by someone brilliant they will never be able to hire? What are you talking about? David took her hands in his. I'm talking about a partnership, you and I, developing a complete line of equipment and protocols for pediatric care. Not just selling technology, but revolutionizing how sick children are treated around the world. David, I'm just a nurse. You're an innovator, a visionary, and you're wasting your talent because you're afraid to dream big. Sarah looked at Hope sleeping peacefully in the stroller. What if it goes wrong? What if it goes right? Sarah, imagine how many children like Gabriel we could save. Imagine the impact we could have. Together, as professional partners and as family. Sarah felt tears forming. Your mother said, my mother was wrong about everything. You're not an obstacle to my success, Sarah. You're my success. You're the reason it's worth building something great. And the Americans? The $1 million offer? To hell with the Americans. Let's build something better right here. Something that is ours, with our values, to help children in New Jersey and around the world. Sarah stood up and walked to the rose bushes they had planted. Are you sure? Because if we do this, there's no turning back. It will be you and me against the world for the rest of our lives. Sarah Johnson. David stood up and followed her. I don't want to face the world. I want to change the world. With you. She turned to him, and this time there was no fear in her eyes. "All right, let's change the world." David kissed her with all the passion and relief he had been holding back for the past 2 weeks. When they parted, he took a small velvet box from his pocket. "Sarah, this question is a year late, but will you marry me?" She opened the box and found a simple yet stunning ring. Not the flashy diamond one would expect from a millionaire, but a green emerald surrounded by small diamonds that perfectly reflected the color of her eyes. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It was my grandmother's, the only person in my family who would have loved you as much as I do." "Yes," Sarah said, extending her trembling hand. "Yes, I accept to marry you." "Un deal." As David placed the ring on her finger, Hope woke up and began to cry softly. They laughed, and Sarah picked up their daughter. "I think she approves," Sarah said, offering the baby to David to hold. "Of course she approves. She knows she's going to have the best stepdad in the world." At that moment, Emily came running home from school, followed by Mrs. Johnson, who had picked her up. "Mr. David!" the girl shouted, throwing herself into his arms. "You're back." "I'm back and I'm never leaving again," he promised, hugging the girl. "Yay, and look, Mommy is wearing a pretty ring." Mrs. Johnson approached with a radiant smile. "It's about time you two stopped this nonsense of being apart." "Mrs. Johnson," David turned to her, still holding Emily, "would you accept to be my official mother-in-law?" "Son, I've considered you family for months." As the sun set over New Jersey, painting the sky pink and gold, the family gathered in the small garden. David had found not only the woman he loved, but also his renewed professional purpose. Sarah had discovered that dreaming big didn't mean sacrificing her identity. "David," she said as they watched Emily play with Hope on the blanket spread out on the grass, "what are we going to call our company? How about the Johnson Mendez Institute for Pediatric Innovation? Johnson Mendez? If you take my name when we marry." Sarah smiled, touching the ring that now adorned her finger. "Sarah Johnson Mendez. Sounds good. Sounds perfect." 6 months later, the first unit of the Johnson Mendez Institute was inaugurated at St. Mary's Hospital, with the presence of journalists, doctors from all over the country, and representatives from international hospitals interested in implementing the revolutionary Johnson Protocol. Sarah, now holding the official title of Director of Nursing Innovation, presented the results of her work to a captivated audience. David watched her from the back of the auditorium, holding Hope in his arms, while Emily proudly showed Mrs. Johnson how her mother appeared on the screens. "And this, ladies and gentlemen," Sarah concluded her presentation, "is what happens when we combine cutting-edge technology with genuine human care. When we remember that behind every statistic is a child, a family, a story." The audience erupted in applause, but Sarah only had eyes for her family at the back of the room. David gave a thumbs up in approval, and she smiled with a full heart. After the presentation, as they walked through the hospital corridors where it all began, David held Sarah's hand. "Do you have any regrets?" he asked. "Just one," she replied, stopping to look him in the eyes. "What?" "That it took me so long to believe we deserved to be happy. And now I know that the best stories are the ones where people find each other when they need it most and choose to fight together for their dreams." Emily ran ahead of them, holding Mrs. Johnson's hand, while David carried Hope, who was playing with his tie. It was an unlikely family, born from a Christmas party, where 2 wounded hearts had found the courage to love again. And as they walked toward the future they had built together, Sarah knew she had found so much more. That love had found its home, its family, and the proof that sometimes the happiest endings are those we could never have imagined, but that reveal themselves to be exactly what our hearts were searching for.